Jonathan Blake walked into the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, feeling like he owned the place. He always did at events like this: charity galas, networking dinners, award ceremonies. As the CEO of Nexus Innovations, one of the most successful tech companies in New York City, he was used to being the center of attention. Tonight was no different. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, his sandy blonde hair neatly styled, he moved through the crowd with ease. Everyone wanted to talk to him, shake his hand, or hear about his latest breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Crystal chandeliers hung high above, casting warm golden light over the sea of elegantly dressed guests. Waiters glided between clusters of people, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres and drinks. Jonathan took it all in, nodding politely as someone complimented him on his recent TED Talk. But something tugged at the edge of his awareness. A flicker of movement near the entrance caught his eye. He turned slightly, scanning the area beyond, the throng of guests. That's when he saw them. Two children playing by the doorway. They were laughing softly, chasing each other around a potted plant. At first glance, they seemed ordinary enough. A boy and a girl, both with sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. But as Jonathan watched, a strange sensation washed over him. There was something eerily familiar about their faces. Their sharp jawlines, the shape of their noses, even the way the boy tilted his head reminded him of himself. His heart skipped a beat. He blinked, trying to dismiss the thought. It had to be a coincidence, right? People looked alike all the time. Still, he couldn't tear his gaze away. The boy, who looked about 9, wore a crisp white shirt tucked into khaki pants. His sister, younger by a couple of years, had on a pale yellow dress that matched her cheerful demeanor. They laughed and whispered conspiratorially, completely unaware of the man staring at them from across the room. Before Jonathan could make sense of what he was seeing, another figure stepped into view. She was a woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her curves just right. Her shoulder-length auburn hair framed her face, and though she carried herself with confidence, there was a tension in her posture. When she turned slightly, Jonathan felt the air leave his lungs. It was Claire Bennett, his ex-wife. Claire hadn't changed much since the last time he'd seen her, 8 long years ago. Her green eyes still held the same intensity, and her presence commanded attention. For a moment, Jonathan forgot where he was. Memories flooded back, unbidden and unwelcome. He remembered their whirlwind romance, the passionate arguments, the bitter fights that eventually drove them apart. Most of all, he remembered the emptiness he felt after she left, taking pieces of him with her. But why was she here now? And why were those children with her? Claire must have sensed his gaze because she turned toward him abruptly. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a split second, neither of them moved. Then slowly, Claire began walking toward him, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The children noticed her absence and followed, trailing behind her like curious shadows. Jonathan's mind raced. What was going on? Was it possible that these kids were hers? If so, who was their father? He couldn't imagine Claire remarrying, without him hearing about it. Besides, the resemblance to him was uncanny, too uncanny to ignore. As Claire approached, Jonathan straightened up, forcing himself to appear calm despite the storm brewing inside him. "Claire," he said, his voice steady but laced with surprise. "What are you doing here?" She stopped a few feet away, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Jonathan." Her tone was measured, almost cautious. "I didn't expect to see you tonight." "Neither did I," he replied, glancing down at the children. "Are these yours?" Claire hesitated before nodding. "Yes, this is Ethan and Lily." She gestured to the boy and girl, who stood quietly beside her, looking up at Jonathan with wide, curious eyes. Jonathan swallowed hard, struggling to keep his composure. "They're beautiful," he managed to say, though the word felt inadequate. Beautiful didn't begin to describe how unsettlingly familiar they looked. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk." Jonathan nodded, though his stomach churned with unease. "Okay, let's step outside." Without waiting for a response, he led the way out of the ballroom and into a quieter hallway. The noise of the party faded behind them, leaving only the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. Claire followed, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder as if to reassure him. Once they were alone, Jonathan turned to face her, his brow furrowed with questions. "What's going on, Claire?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Why do they look like me?" Claire sighed, her shoulders sagging under the weight of whatever she was about to say. "It's complicated," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure how or when to tell you, but you deserve to know the truth." Jonathan's pulse quickened. "Tell me what?" She glanced at the children, then back at him. "Ethan and Lily. They're yours, Jonathan." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at her, dumbfounded, as if waiting for her to clarify or laugh and say it was all a joke. But Claire's expression remained serious, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "How is that even possible?" he demanded, his voice rising. "We haven't been together in years." "I know," she said quickly, holding up a hand to stop him. "It's not what you think. After we divorced, I wanted a family, but I knew having another relationship wasn't going to work for me. So I found another way." "What does that mean?" Jonathan asked, his confusion mounting. Claire hesitated, searching for the right words. "I used your DNA," she admitted finally. "There was a scientist, someone who worked with Nexus Innovations. He helped me use your genetic material to conceive Ethan and Lily artificially." Jonathan's world tilted on its axis. He staggered back a step, his mind reeling. "You did what?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Claire continued, tears welling in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you. I wanted to give them a chance. To give us a chance. Even if it wasn't the way we planned." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Jonathan looked down at Ethan and Lily, who were watching him with innocent curiosity. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation. They only knew that this man, this stranger, somehow mattered deeply to their mother. Finally, Jonathan found his voice. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his tone tinged with anger and disbelief. "I was scared," Claire admitted. "Scared of how you'd react, scared of losing them. I thought it would be easier this way." "Easier for who?" Jonathan shot back, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Do you have any idea what this means? Do you realize what you've done?" Claire flinched but didn't respond. Instead, she reached out and placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder, drawing strength from her children. Jonathan watched the gesture, his anger warring with a growing sense of responsibility. Whatever mistakes Claire had made, these kids were innocent. They deserved answers, and maybe, just maybe, they deserved a father. Taking a deep breath, Jonathan forced himself to calm down. "We'll figure this out," he said, more to himself than to Claire. "But we need to talk. Really. Talk about everything." Claire nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Thank you," she murmured. "That's all I ask." As they stood there in the dimly lit hallway, surrounded by unanswered questions and fragile hope, Jonathan realized his life was about to change forever. Whether he liked it or not, Ethan and Lily were part of his future now, and somehow he would have to find a way to embrace it. After the initial shock wore off, Jonathan Blake felt like he was standing on shaky ground. Everything he thought he knew about his life had been turned upside down in just a few minutes. Claire's confession echoed in his mind. "Ethan and Lily, they're yours." How could that even be possible? He replayed her words over and over again, trying to make sense of it all. Artificial conception, his DNA, a rogue scientist, It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, not real life. Claire stood across from him, her green eyes filled with guilt and fear. She clutched Ethan's hand tightly, as if afraid he might slip away. Lily peeked out shyly from behind her mother's leg, glancing between Jonathan and Claire with innocent curiosity. Neither child seemed to understand the weight of what was happening. They were simply caught in the middle of an adult storm. Jonathan took a deep breath, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "You used my DNA," he repeated slowly, his voice low and steady despite the turmoil inside him. "How did you even get it?" "It wasn't hard," Claire admitted quietly. "You left so many samples behind during your time at Nexus Innovations. Blood tests, medical records. It was all there for anyone who knew where to look." Jonathan frowned, his jaw tightening. "And the scientist? Who was he?" "He was someone I trusted," Claire said, her voice wavering slightly. "Someone who believed in giving people second chances. He didn't ask questions when I came to him with my idea. All I wanted was a family, Jonathan. After everything fell apart between us, I couldn't imagine starting over with someone else. But I still wanted kids. Your kids." Her words hit Jonathan like a punch to the chest. He stared at her, searching her face for any sign of deceit or exaggeration, but all he saw was raw honesty and pain. Pain that mirrored his own. "You should have told me," he said finally, his tone softer now. "No matter how complicated things were between us, you owed me the truth." "I know," Claire whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "Believe me, I know. But every time I tried to tell you, I froze. What if you rejected them? What if you hated me for what I'd done?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at Ethan and Lily, studying their faces more closely. They really did look like him. The same sharp jawline, the same piercing blue eyes. Even their mannerisms reminded him of himself. Ethan's confident stance, Lily's thoughtful expression. It was uncanny. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to be their father. But the reality quickly set. And these weren't just ordinary children. They were products of cutting-edge technology, conceived without his knowledge or consent. And while they seemed healthy and happy now, Jonathan couldn't help but wonder about the risks involved. Genetic engineering was still a relatively new field, full of unknowns and potential complications. Had Claire considered the long-term consequences of her decision? "What happens next?" he asked, turning back to Claire. "Do you expect me to just step into their lives after 8 years of being absent?" "No," Claire replied quickly. "I don't expect anything from you, Jonathan. I've raised them on my own this far, and I'll continue to do so if that's what you want. But I think they deserve to know you, to know where they came from." Jonathan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. As much as he wanted to walk away from this mess, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Ethan and Lily. They were part of him, whether he liked it or not. And if he walked away now, he'd be abandoning them before they even had a chance to meet him. "Okay," he said after a long pause. "We'll take it one step at a time. But we need to talk more. About everything. About how this happened. About what comes next. And about the risks involved." Claire nodded, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she murmured. "That's all I'm asking for now." With that, they agreed to meet again soon, away from the chaos of the gala. Jonathan watched as Claire led Ethan and Lily back toward the ballroom, her hand resting gently on each of their shoulders. For a moment, he envied the ease with which she interacted with them. She was already their mother, their anchor. He was just a stranger trying to figure out where he fit into their world. Later that night, Jonathan returned to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled below, but he barely noticed them. His mind was consumed by thoughts of Claire, Ethan, and Lily. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sank into the leather chair by the window, staring out at the skyline without really seeing it. He thought about his career, his relentless pursuit of success. For years, he'd poured every ounce of energy into building Nexus Innovations, sacrificing personal relationships along the way. He'd always told himself that family could wait, that there would be time for kids later, once he'd achieved his goals. But now, faced with the reality of Ethan and Lily, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The irony wasn't lost on him either. His company had pioneered some of the very technologies that made artificial conception possible. He'd championed innovation, pushing boundaries and redefining what was scientifically achievable. Yet here he was, blindsided by the unintended consequences of his own work. What had started as a noble pursuit of progress had somehow spiraled into something deeply personal and profoundly complicated. Determined to learn more, Jonathan logged onto his laptop and began digging through old research files related to genetic engineering. He scrolled through pages of data, diagrams, and case studies, searching for anything that might shed light on Claire's claims. It didn't take long for him to find what he was looking over, an archived project detailing the use of synthetic DNA replication in human reproduction. As he read through the details, his stomach churned. The procedure was experimental, designed primarily for couples struggling with infertility. While successful births had been reported, the long-term effects remained unclear. There was no guarantee that Ethan and Lily wouldn't face health issues later in life, or worse, unforeseen genetic mutations. Jonathan closed the laptop with a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples. The implications were staggering. Not only had Claire taken an enormous risk by using his DNA, but she'd also placed Ethan and Lily in uncharted territory. If anything went wrong, the responsibility would ultimately fall on him, as their biological father and the architect of the technology itself. Despite his growing concerns, Jonathan couldn't suppress the flicker of hope stirring within him. For the first time in years, he found himself imagining a different kind of future, one that included laughter, bedtime stories, and school plays. He pictured himself teaching Ethan and Lily about science, sharing his passion for discovery and innovation. Maybe, just maybe, he could still be the father they deserved. But first, he needed answers and a plan. Tomorrow, he would reach out to Claire and propose a meeting. Together, they would figure out how to move forward, not just for themselves, but for Ethan and Lily. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jonathan was determined to face them head-on. After all, he owed it to his children, the ones he never knew he had. The next morning, Jonathan Blake woke up feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. His mind was still racing with thoughts of Claire, Ethan, and Lily. He replayed their conversation from the previous night over and over again, trying to make sense of everything. It wasn't easy. For years, he'd lived his life on his own terms, focused solely on his career and personal ambitions. Now, out of nowhere, he had 2 children to think about, and a complicated past with Claire to untangle. After showering and getting dressed, Jonathan decided it was time to take action. He sent Claire a text message suggesting they meet later, that day at a quiet cafe near Central Park. To his relief, she agreed. They arranged to bring Ethan and Lily along, hoping the neutral setting would help ease any tension between them. By mid-afternoon, Jonathan arrived at the cafe, his hands shoved nervously into the pockets of his blazer. He spotted Claire immediately, sitting by the window with the kids. She looked up as he approached, offering him a small, hesitant smile. Ethan and Lily sat beside her, their faces lighting up with curiosity when they saw him. "Hi," Jonathan said softly, sliding into the seat across from them. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," Claire replied, her voice calm but tinged with nervousness. "I figured this was a good place to talk." Jonathan nodded, glancing at the children. "You guys hungry? I can order something for you." Ethan grinned shyly. "Can we get hot chocolate?" "Sure thing," Jonathan said, signaling for the waiter. He ordered hot chocolates for the kids and coffees for himself and Claire. As they waited for their drinks, an awkward silence settled over the table. Jonathan cleared his throat, unsure how to begin. Finally, he turned to Claire. "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me last night," he said carefully. "About everything." Claire nodded, her green eyes meeting his. "Me too. I know it's a lot to process." "It is," Jonathan admitted. "But I want to understand more. Not just about how this happened, but about them. He gestured toward Ethan and Lily, who were happily stirring marshmallows into their hot chocolates. Claire sighed, leaning back in her chair. Okay, ask me anything. Jonathan hesitated before speaking. Why didn't you tell me sooner, even after they were born? Why keep it a secret? Claire looked down at her hands, twisting the strap of her purse nervously. I was scared, Jonathan. Scared of your reaction. Scared of losing control of the situation. After our divorce, I felt like I'd lost you completely. When I found out about the possibility of using your DNA, it felt like my only chance to have a piece of you back, even if it wasn't perfect. Her words struck a chord deep within him. Despite everything, Jonathan couldn't deny the ache of regret he felt when he thought about their failed marriage. They'd both made mistakes, pushed each other away, and let bitterness consume them. But now, sitting here with Claire and their children, he realized how much they'd both sacrificed in the process. What about the risks? He asked, his tone serious. Did you know how dangerous this procedure could be? Claire's expression hardened slightly. I knew there were risks, yes, but I also trusted the scientist who helped me. He assured me that the technology was safe, that Ethan and Lily would be healthy. And so far they've been fine. No health issues, no complications. That doesn't mean there won't be problems later, Jonathan pointed out, his voice tinged with frustration. This is uncharted territory, Claire. We don't know what kind of long-term effects this might have on them. I know that, Claire snapped, her composure slipping for a moment. Then, softer, she added, I know I took a huge gamble. But I did it because I wanted them more than anything else in the world. I love them, Jonathan. And I'd do it all over again if I had to. Her honesty caught him off guard. For the first time, Jonathan allowed himself to see things from her perspective, not just as the wronged party, but as someone who had acted out of love and desperation. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped him understand her. Choice is better. I believe you, he said finally, his voice quieter now. And I'm not saying I don't want to be part of their lives, I do. But we need to figure out how to move forward, together, for their sake. Claire nodded, relief washing over her face. That's all I want, for them to know you, to have a relationship with you. As the afternoon wore on, Jonathan found himself growing more comfortable around Ethan and Lily. At first, they were shy, clinging to Claire whenever he spoke directly to them. But as the conversation shifted to lighter topics, school, hobbies, favorite foods, they began opening up. Ethan proudly showed Jonathan a drawing he'd made of a rocket ship, while Lily chattered excited herself about her love for puzzles. Watching them interact, Jonathan felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. These kids weren't just abstract concepts anymore. They were real people with personalities, dreams, and quirks. And despite the unusual circumstances of their conception, they were undeniably his. Before leaving the cafe, Jonathan promised Claire they'd continue talking soon. We'll work this out, he assured her, placing a hand briefly on hers. One step at a time. On the drive home, Jonathan's mind buzzed with possibilities. He thought about the challenges ahead, the ethical dilemmas, the potential health risks, the complexities of co-parenting with someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. But for the first time in a long time, he also felt a sense of purpose beyond his work at Nexus Innovations. These children needed him, and he wasn't going to let them down. Over the next few days, Jonathan threw himself into learning everything he could about genetic engineering and its implications. He scoured research papers, consulted experts in the field, and even reached out to the scientist Claire had mentioned, though the man had since retired and refused to comment further. The more he learned, the clearer it became that Ethan and Lily were pioneers in a rapidly evolving field. Their existence raised questions not just about science, but about identity, ethics, and the future of humanity itself. Despite the weight of these revelations, Jonathan couldn't shake the growing excitement he felt. For years, he'd poured his energy into building Nexus Innovations, driven by a desire to push boundaries and change the world. Now he saw an opportunity to channel that passion into something even more meaningful, ensuring that his children, and others like them, had a safe, ethical path forward. When he met with Claire again a week later, Jonathan came prepared. He brought printouts of studies, notes on potential risks, and ideas for monitoring Ethan and Lily's health. Claire listened intently, impressed by his dedication. Together they began drafting a plan, not just for raising the kids, but for addressing the broader implications of their unique situation. As weeks turned into months, Jonathan grew closer to Ethan and Lily, carving out time in his busy schedule to spend with them. He took them to museums, taught them about robotics, and even helped Ethan build a model rocket. Each moment spent together strengthened the bond between them, filling gaps Jonathan hadn't realized existed in his life. Through it all, Claire remained a constant presence, working alongside him to navigate the challenges of co-parenting. While their romantic relationship was firmly in the past, they developed a newfound respect for one another, united by their shared love for their children. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Jonathan felt ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a CEO or an innovator, he was a father. And nothing mattered more than making sure Ethan and Lily had the best possible future. Jonathan Blake sat at his desk in the Nexus Innovations headquarters, staring out at the sprawling cityscape below. The view was breathtaking, skyscrapers piercing the clouds, streets buzzing with life. But Jonathan barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of Ethan, Lily, and the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. For weeks he'd been juggling his role as CEO with his newfound identity as a father, and it wasn't easy. Every day brought new challenges, new questions, and new emotions he wasn't prepared to handle. But today something felt different. Today Jonathan had clarity. He realized that his work at Nexus Innovations wasn't just about profits or cutting edge innovations. It was about shaping the future. And right now the future included Ethan and Lily. If he wanted to ensure their safety, and the safety of others like them, he needed to take bold action. He leaned back in his chair and glanced at the pile of research papers scattered across his desk. Over the past few months, he'd immersed himself in studying the science behind artificial conception and genetic engineering. What he found disturbed him. While the technology held incredible promise, it also carried significant risks that many companies, including his own, had overlooked in their race for progress. It was time to change that. Picking up a pen, Jonathan began sketching ideas on a blank sheet of paper. By the end of the hour, he had a rough outline of a plan, a foundation dedicated to advancing responsible genetic research. Its mission would be twofold: to fund studies exploring the long-term effects of genetic engineering, and to establish ethical guidelines for its use. The foundation would operate independently of Nexus Innovations, ensuring transparency and accountability. As he worked, memories of Ethan and Lily kept surfacing in his mind. He thought about the first time he took them to the museum, how Ethan's eyes lit up when he saw the robotics exhibit. He remembered teaching Lily how to solve a particularly tricky puzzle, her face glowing with pride when she finally figured it out. These moments reminded him why this initiative mattered, not just for his children, but for everyone who might one day benefit from, or suffer because of, genetic advancements. When the draft was complete, Jonathan called an emergency meeting with his executive team. They gathered in the boardroom, exchanging curious glances as they waited for him to speak. Jonathan stood at the head of the table, his posture confident despite the weight of what he was about to propose. "I've spent the last several months reflecting on the direction of our company," he began, his voice steady. "We've achieved incredible things at Nexus Innovations, pushing boundaries and redefining what's possible. But with great power comes great responsibility. Our work doesn't exist in a vacuum. It affects real people, real lives." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Many of you know that I recently discovered I have 2 children, Ethan and Lily. They were conceived using advanced genetic technology developed by this company. While they're healthy and thriving, their existence has forced me to confront Some hard truths about the implications of our work. The room fell silent as Jonathan shared more details, careful not to reveal too much about his personal life. Instead, he focused on the broader issue, the lack of regulation and oversight in genetic engineering. We can't ignore the potential consequences of our innovations, he said firmly. If we want to create a better future, we need to prioritize ethics alongside progress. To his surprise, the team responded positively. Some nodded in agreement, while others offered suggestions for improving transparency and accountability. Together, they brainstormed ways to implement stricter testing protocols and collaborate with independent researchers to study the long-term effects of genetic modifications. By the end of the meeting, Jonathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The foundation idea was officially approved and planning was underway. In the coming weeks, he announced the initiative publicly during a press conference, emphasizing the importance of balancing innovation with responsibility. The announcement sparked widespread debate, with critics questioning the timing and motives behind the move. But Jonathan didn't care. He knew he was doing the right thing, for his family, for his company, and for society as a whole. Meanwhile, Jonathan continued building bridges with Claire, Ethan, and Lily. Their relationship evolved slowly but steadily, marked by small victories and occasional setbacks. At first, Jonathan struggled to find his footing as a parent. Used to delegating tasks and solving problems quickly, he found parenting required patience, flexibility, and emotional vulnerability, qualities he wasn't accustomed to displaying. Claire proved to be an invaluable ally during this transition. She offered guidance without judgment, helping Jonathan navigate the complexities of raising children. Together, they established routines that worked for everyone, blending their individual parenting styles into something cohesive and supportive. For example, Jonathan introduced Science Saturdays, where he taught Ethan and Lily fun experiments, while Claire organized art projects and outdoor adventures to balance things out. One Saturday afternoon, after a particularly successful rocket launch experiment in Central Park, Jonathan found himself sitting on a bench with Claire, watching Ethan and Lily play tag nearby. The sun warmed his skin, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them. It was peaceful, a rare moment of calm amidst the chaos of their lives. "You're good with them," Claire said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her tone was warm, almost admiring. Jonathan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I wouldn't say that. I'm still figuring it out, to be honest." "You're trying," she replied, smiling. "And that's what matters most. They see how much effort you're putting in, and they love you for it." Her words caught him off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't fully processed yet. Love. It was such a simple word, yet it carried so much weight. Did Ethan and Lily really love him? Could they, after everything? As if sensing his thoughts, Claire added, "They don't hold grudges, Jonathan. Kids are resilient. All they care about is that you're here now." Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them away quickly. "Thank you," he murmured, "for everything, for trusting me enough to let me into their lives." Claire reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. "It hasn't been easy for either of us, but seeing how happy they are, it makes it all worth it." Later that evening, as Jonathan tucked Ethan and Lily into bed at Claire's apartment, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't the life he'd envisioned for himself, far from it. But it was becoming something beautiful in its own way. The laughter, the curiosity, the unconditional love, they were gifts he never knew he needed. "Good night, Dad," Lily whispered sleepily, hugging her stuffed rabbit close. Jonathan froze, his heart swelling with emotion. He'd heard her call him Dad before, but tonight it hit him differently. It wasn't just a title. It was a bond, a connection forged through shared experiences and mutual trust. "Good night, sweetheart," he replied, kissing her forehead gently. Turning to Ethan, he ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. "Sweet dreams, buddy." As he turned off the light and closed the bedroom door behind him, Jonathan allowed himself a moment to reflect. Life had thrown him a curveball, no doubt about it. But instead of running away, he'd chosen to step up, to embrace the challenge and grow into the role he was meant to play, not just as a CEO, but as a father. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Blake felt truly fulfilled. Months had passed since Jonathan Blake first learned about Ethan and Lily, and his life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. What started as a shocking revelation had become a journey of growth, responsibility, and unexpected joy. He wasn't just the CEO of Nexus Innovations anymore. He was a father, a role that challenged him every single day, but also brought immense fulfillment. The foundation he'd established, the Blake Initiative for Responsible Genetic Research, was gaining momentum. Scientists from around the world were collaborating on groundbreaking studies to explore the long-term effects of genetic engineering. Ethical guidelines were being drafted, ensuring that future innovations prioritized humanity over profit. Jonathan took pride in knowing that his work would help protect not only his children, but countless others who might one day benefit from or be affected by this technology. But it wasn't just his professional life that had changed. On weekends, Jonathan spent time with Ethan and Lily, creating memories they would cherish forever. They went on hikes, visited museums, and even built a treehouse together in Claire's backyard. Each outing brought them closer, strengthening the bond they shared. For Jonathan, these moments were priceless, a reminder of why all the hard work mattered. One sunny Saturday morning, Jonathan arrived at Claire's apartment, ready for their planned trip to Central Park. Ethan and Lily greeted him at the door, their faces lighting up with excitement. "Are we going to throw leaves today?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "Of course," Jonathan replied with a grin, ruffling her hair. "We wouldn't miss it." Claire joined them shortly after, dressed in a cozy sweater and jeans. She handed Jonathan a thermos of hot chocolate before ushering everyone into the car. The drive to the park was filled with chatter and laughter, the kind of easy conversation that came naturally now. Gone were the days of awkward silences and tense exchanges. Over time, Jonathan and Claire had developed a rhythm, a partnership, rooted in mutual respect and love for their children. When they arrived at Central Park, the vibrant colors of autumn greeted them. Leaves in shades of gold, orange, and crimson blanketed the ground, crunching softly underfoot. Ethan immediately ran ahead, kicking piles of leaves into the air while Lily chased after him, giggling uncontrollably. Jonathan watched them with a smile, feeling a warmth in his chest that he couldn't quite put into words. "You've come a long way," Claire said softly, walking beside him. Her green eyes sparkled with sincerity. "I know this hasn't been easy for you," Jonathan nodded, glancing at her. "It hasn't, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. These kids, they're amazing. You did an incredible job raising them." Claire blushed slightly, shaking her head. "We raised them together, even if you didn't know it at first. And look at us now, who would have thought?" They shared a laugh, the sound blending with the rustling leaves and distant chirping of birds. It was strange how far they'd come, from estranged ex-spouses to co-parents working side by side. Their romantic relationship was firmly in the past, but their friendship had grown stronger than ever. Together, they were building something beautiful for Ethan and Lily, a stable, loving environment where they could thrive. As the afternoon wore on, Jonathan found himself fully immersed in the simple joys of parenthood. He helped Ethan climb a low-hanging branch to get a better view of the park, cheering him on when he wobbled but stayed steady. Later, he sat cross-legged on the grass with Lily, helping her piece together a puzzle she'd brought along. Every interaction felt natural, effortless, as though he'd been doing this his entire life. At one point, Claire snapped a photo of the four of them using her phone. Ethan and Lily stood in front, grinning ear to ear, while Jonathan and Claire posed behind them, their arms casually resting on each other's shoulders. Looking at the picture later, Jonathan realized how much had changed, not just in his circumstances, but within himself. He was no longer the man who lived only for success and recognition. He was someone who valued connection, compassion, and the little things that made life meaningful. By the time they headed home, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city skyline. Ethan and Lily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from their day of play. Claire drove quietly, humming along to the radio, while Jonathan gazed out the window, lost in thought. He thought about the challenges ahead, the ongoing research, the ethical debates, the potential health risks for Ethan and Lily. There was still so much uncertainty, so many unanswered questions, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, Jonathan felt hopeful. He knew he couldn't control everything, but he could do his best to prepare for whatever came next. When they pulled up to Claire's apartment, Jonathan carefully carried Lily inside while Claire brought Ethan. Tucking them into bed, he kissed each of them goodnight, lingering for a moment to watch their peaceful expressions. Then, stepping into the living room, he turned to Claire. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting me, for letting me be part of their lives." Claire smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "You've earned it, Jonathan. You've worked hard to be here, and they love having you around. That's all that matters." He nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "I'll see you tomorrow?" "Of course," she replied. "We're in this together, remember?" With that, Jonathan left, driving back to his penthouse with a heart full of gratitude. As he stood on his balcony overlooking the city, he reflected on how much his priorities had shifted. Once he'd measured success by accolades and achievements. Now he measured it by the smiles on Ethan and Lily's faces, by the knowledge that he was making a difference not just in their lives but in the world. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but Jonathan was ready to face it. With Claire by his side as a partner and friend, and with Ethan and Lily leading the way, he knew he could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly whole. And as the lights of New York City twinkled below him, Jonathan Blake smiled, knowing he'd finally found his purpose.